Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name's Excoundrel. I am an educational Wild Rift content creator. I focus on trying to create content that helps you get better at the game, either through analysing my own replays, analysing challenger players, analysing esports. I do Wild Rift tier lists. I also do kind of like patch breakdowns and stuff like that. And today we're going to be looking at champions that are, in my opinion, some of the best champions to carry with in the game in terms of 1v9. A lot of people have asked me, do you have a recommendation for champions that are just good when I'm playing solo queue and I want to climb the ladder? So these champions are meant for you if you are trying to climb in solo queue, you don't know which champions are the best to kind of give you that potential to completely outplay your opponents and absolutely 1v9 carry the game. This is a list of champions that I think can do that. I'm going to give you 10 champions across a variety of roles, and I think these are the 10 best champions that have the 1v9 potential in terms of just being able to, right now, in this current state of the game, run over everybody. So if you enjoy this type of content, feel free to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, and also thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. The first champion that I'm going to talk about is Yasuo. Yasuo is incredibly strong as a 1v9 champion. He has plenty of outplay potential. He can absolutely dominate team fights. And I think if you master Yasuo, Yasuo can be one of the best champions in the game. He's got an incredibly high skill cap. He takes a lot of practice. Yasuo one-tricks in high elo are usually like very scary because they know how to play their champion incredibly well. And as I said, he's got plenty of outplay potential. When I talk about champions that I think can 1v9, I'm talking about champions that can force 1v1s, can take over the game through getting fed in their lane. I don't think about things like Orianna, because Orianna, while she's an incredibly good pick right now, her 1v9 potential is not huge. Like, she can't solo carry a game unless she gets really, really fed. And also in lane, Orianna can't force a 1v1. She can't guarantee herself kills. If the enemy's playing safe, you're probably never going to die to an Orianna. Whereas Yasuo, he can force the issue. He can get onto the enemy in the lane using his wind dash, and he can essentially just go in over and over again. And if you know Yasuo's limits and you know Yasuo's barriers, like he is like a really, really, really high intensity champion in terms of just getting kills and taking over the game with the kills. I'm going to show you, with every champion that I cover, builds that are played by the top between 1 and 5 players. I've looked through the builds from the top players of each champion, and I've selected a couple that I think are like the most applicable. Some of them are a little bit niche, but I'm selecting some that are the most applicable. This right here is from the number 4 Yasuo player on the server. I think this is like a generically pretty strong build. It's Phantom Dancer into Blade of the Ruin King, into whatever boots and boots upgrade that you would like. I think Quicksilver is usually the best, but I've seen some people go Hextech Belt as well. Into Infinity Edge, GA, and Sterak's. It gives you a nice blend between critical strike and defensive. In terms of runes, these are the most common rune setups that I've seen. Conqueror into Hunter Vampirism, Hunter Titan, and Honey Sweet Tooth to give you the extra sustain in lane. Because Yasuo in ranged matchups can be a little bit difficult to play, so the extra sustain is pretty important. The other Yasuo build that I wanted to highlight was this one here. This is played by the number 1 Yasuo player. Static Shiv into Infinity Edge, into Death Dance, Sterak's, and GA. So very defensive build setup, where a lot of his lifesteal comes from the Death Dance and also the Hunter Vampirism. And obviously then either you can have lifesteal boots or you can have boots that are applicable to the situation. So, my first champion on the list is Yasuo. If you can master Yasuo and you can play Yasuo at a very high level, I believe him to be one of the strongest 1v9 solo carry champions in the game. Again, another champion that's got a similar vein to Yasuo is Akali. Akali has got plenty of outplay potential. She can blow up fed carries when she gets fed. She's got the ability to force the issue in lane. When I say force the issue, I talked a little about it with Yasuo. Force the issue means essentially force a 1v1. Like, basically, she has the kit where you can run at your enemy opponent in lane, and if you have, your abilities up and off cooldown, you can usually look to find a kill. Champions that can do that are champions that can take over a game. Champions that can't do that are champions that are often more reliant on getting fed through team fights, and that often makes them more team reliant. Champions that can go into their lane and just slap the enemy in a 1v1, get the kill, and walk away are champions that can get fed and take over a game by themselves. And that's what Yasuo and Akali are particularly adept at doing. Now, the build that I'm going to show you is the build that the #1 Akali player plays. It is Liandry's into Infinity Orb into boots, whichever boots upgrade suits the situation. I've seen lots of boots upgrades for Akali, Quicksilver, Stasis, and also Hextech Belt, or even Teleport if you're playing like a split push Akali. Into Rabadons, and then what you might find interesting is that a lot of top Akali players stop after 3 offensive items and go into Guardian Angel and then Adaptive Helm, and they play a more defensive setup at the end, which I think is actually relatively sensible. Also, you might wonder why Hextech Gunblade is being missed from this build. Hextech Gunblade is a good item. It's got some Vamp on it, which obviously makes it good for Akali in general. But Liandry's is actually quite a big power spike for Akali, and I think because she generally tends to be in fights for quite a long time with her Shroud, she can generate that 10% damage boost relatively easily. The most common rune setup that I've seen is Conqueror, Brutal, Hunter Titan, and also Sweet Tooth, but some Akali players do take Hunter Vampirism, especially if you're not going to run Hextech Gunblade, so it might be that you want to switch out Brutal for Hunter Vampirism. But again, these are runes that generally favor roaming, they favor getting involved in as many kills as possible, but again, this is the kind of start that you need to make on a champion if you are going to start to take over a game and look to 1v9. So Yasuo and Akali, both champions that can essentially just force 1v1s in lane, get kills, and take over the game. And that's why I think they're 2 of the best champions for 1v9ing. Okay, gonna include some junglers now, and I'm gonna start off with Shyvana. I believe Shyvana to be one of the best jungle 1v9 carries in the game for a mixture of reasons. She's relatively low risk in the sense that, you know, you don't need to gank to be successful on Shyvana. Obviously, you should be looking for gank opportunities, but for the most part, Shyvana should be looking to farm her jungle as much as possible, get to level 5 quickly, and force neutral objectives. And speaking of neutral objectives, alongside the Mastermind rune, Shyvana is one of the absolute best junglers at taking neutral objectives, especially dragons, which obviously helps Shyvana snowball relatively well. So if you can get to level 5 and get to the first dragon, as you know, and if your team have not completely run it down, or even if they have, Shyvana has excellent carry potential from just snowballing from the first dragon, and she's one of the best junglers in the game for essentially forcing objectives and snowballing off that. Not only that, she's also an incredible duelist. She's very good in team fights when she's got her dragon form up and available, because she can dive to the back line, she can blow up AD carries, she can blow up mages, and she can also remain relatively tanky. She's a team fight monster, an objective monster, a farming monster, and especially once you get your ultimate, she can be a bit of a ganking monster as well. She's kind of got everything. There are very few weak parts of Shyvana's game. The only weak parts of Shyvana's game are her very early levels, where it's not quite as bad as like Master Yi. Master Yi is like really terrible in the early game, where Shyvana might not be able to contest scuttles, or if she gets invaded by a Lee Sin, it might be a little bit tough for her to actually take those fights. But beyond that phase of the game, Shyvana becomes an absolute monster, and I think she truly is one of the best 1v9 junglers in the game. This build and rune setup, by the way, is played by pretty much exclusively all of the top Shyvanas. I looked through most of them, and a lot of them are just reflecting this same build. Triforce, Guardian Angel, any like relevant boot upgrades into the Redemption, Blade of the Ruined King into Spirit Visage and Randuin's Omen. I think Spirit Visage and Randuin's Omen are relatively flexible. I think you could also potentially include a Sterak's Gauge in here if you wanted to go more aggressive whilst also retaining a little bit of defensive utility, but this is the build that most top Shyvana players are playing. And the rune setup is also pretty much exclusively the same one. You're seeing Conqueror, Brutal, just for that early clear pressure, into Hunter Titan. Hunter Titan very good at giving you the excess tenacity, especially if you don't go Mercury Treads, and also getting you that extra health, which is really nice. And Mastermind is an absolute must. I genuinely believe Shyvana to be one of the best junglers in the game for carrying games by herself. And I definitely think if you're in the jungle, she's one of the junglers that you should pick up because she has got pure 1v9 potential. You're going to see quite a few junglers on this list, and the reason being is that A, jungle I think is the most influential role in the game in terms of getting wins in solo queue, and B, there are quite a lot of junglers that can just solo carry games if they get rolling. Lee Sin, although he is definitely a shadow of his former self, like Lee Sin used to be much better at doing this, a good Lee Sin can still absolutely carry the game. Opposite to Shyvana, he's very good at impacting lanes early. He's one of the best junglers for punishing enemy junglers that are slow to clear or go low in the jungle or are not supposed to be fighting early. So Lee Sin can really get into the enemy jungle and shut down the enemy jungler in its entirety. And if a Lee Sin gets rolling, he can, especially if you're a really good Lee Sin, like you have the flash kick mechanics, you're good at isolating carries, you can just blow up the backline with relative ease. You can also pick out really important members and kick them back into your team. He's got the ability to dive over walls and steal objectives relatively easily. The high mobility of this champion also makes him incredibly strong in skirmish situations as well. Lee Sin is one of the best junglers for 1v9 carrying. He is a much higher skill cap than Shyvana, I will say that. If you're looking for a jungler that doesn't require as much mechanical skill, I think Shyvana can do what Lee Sin can do without requiring the same level of skill necessary. However, if you're willing to put the hours in, if you're willing to really play this guy to its highest level, I think he is one of the best junglers for absolutely just steamrollering a game. This is the build that is used by most of the top Lee Sin players right now. It is Youmuu's Ghostblade into Trinity Force, into GA, and then into Death's Dance and Randuin Zoman. Again, boot upgrades really depends on what you're after. You could go Hextech Belt, you could go Redemption if you're going for a more team-orientated approach. Lots of options. You could go Righteous Glory for an extra bit of movement speed engage. Runes, these are, again, very similar runes that you'll see most junglers play with. Conqueror, Brutal, Hunter Titan, and Mastermind. Again, you know, what you will find, and I think a lot of top-level junglers have the Mastermind rune because it is such an important rune in terms of, A, snowballing your team, but B, also being able to focus objectives much more easily. So Lee Sin, if you can master him, if you can play him to a high level, he is absolutely one of the best junglers for running away with the game. He's also one of the best junglers for forcing the enemy jungler out of the game as well. He's very, very good at taking early fights. He's kind of an unmatched duelist at level 3. He's one of the strongest level 3 champions in the game. So yeah, Lee Sin is just very, very good, especially for getting early leads and running with them. Okay, I want to talk about another jungler. Surprise, surprise. Evelynn. Evelynn is a jungler who really can absolutely 1v9 carry. Just for the pure ability, for the same reason as Yasuo and Akali, she is just an assassin from the jungle. If she can start rolling in terms of kills, she can blow up anybody that she gets close to, and that is a very, very useful skill in terms of taking out the most important carries on the enemy team. And if you can do that effectively in team fights, you're obviously going to carry the games with relative ease. So Evelynn is very much a jungler that is more focused on ganking and more focused on killing than she is on objectives. The difference between Shyvana and Evelynn is that Shyvana can carry through objective control, she carries through farming, she carries through teamfight presence. Evelynn is less about that. She's more about ganking and killing champions. She rolls by killing champions, and then essentially can take over the game by just single-handedly bursting anybody that she wants to if she gets rolling. And so yeah, I think Evelynn is very much a 1v9 jungler for that reason. There are two builds that I want to go through. The rune setups for both of these builds are the same. These are the builds, again, used by the top Evelynn players. This is the number 1 Evelynn build, and I'm going to show you the number 2 Evelynn build. The reason I'm going to show you both of them is they are quite different, and so I think it's interesting to look at the both of them. You'll notice that Evelynn doesn't go for Mastermind. This is obviously the rune setup that you're seeing here is very, very common for the entire junglers, but she doesn't go Mastermind. The reason she doesn't go Mastermind is because she's more interested in farming champions than she is farming objectives. Obviously, Evelynn's got great objective control with her ultimate. She can use that to execute most objectives with you know, combined with Smite. It's very difficult to outsmite her. But getting that Hunter Genius rune going for the cooldown reduction on your ultimate especially is really important. So a lot of top Evelynn players go for that over the Mastermind rune. So this build is more burst heavy. This is Infinity Orb into Lichbane, into Rabadon's Death Cap, into whatever the hell you like after that, really. You could go Liandry's, you can go Morellonomicon like you see here for Grievous Wounds, you can go Void Staff if they're building Magic Resist. But the core item build of Infinity Orb into Lichbane, into Rabadon's is going to get you the majority of the game. If you get that and you're fed, you're probably killing anybody. And this is the build that's primarily around blowing someone up, especially around the first dragon fight if you can finish Infinity Orb. The second build is a build played by a guy called Jose VTS. I know him from Twitter, nice guy, and he's the second ranked Evelynn on the server, and he goes Ryalize into Infinity Orb, into Rabadon's, Liandry's, and then Void Staff. Rylai's first is a very interesting choice. It's not something that I would have thought of, and I'm guessing it's because it makes his ganks slightly better. He's able to slow the enemy down by using hate spikes, so that allows him to catch up to them with relative ease. Also allows him to be more effective at charming them, I suppose, because you can, you know, slow them down, then charm them afterwards, and they're not going to be able to escape from you as easily as they would be able to. It also gives you some health, and actually gives you quite a lot of AP, so it still makes you relevant for those first skirmishes and first fights around Dragon. So those are the two builds that I wanted to talk about with Evelynn. I think they're both pretty good, and Evelynn is definitely a 1v9 jungler. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about Olaf, who is both a Baron laner and a jungler. So in this, I'm going to show you some builds from the top players. In the top 5 players for Olaf, there are both Baron lane mains and jungle mains. This is a wild one, though. The reason I think Olaf is a 1v5er, right now, I think he's about to get nerfed. Don't get me wrong. I do think Olaf's about to get nerfed. I still think he'll have 1v5 carry or 1v9 carry potential, because he's just so strong in teamfight situations right now. The ability to ignore all CC and run down the enemy carry is very, very strong. And I think, you know, at this current state in the game, Olaf is definitely a Baron laner or a jungler who, if he gets fed enough, will just run down the enemy, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the nothing you can do about it part is definitely the part that makes Olaf very strong. So I think Olaf is almost certainly a carry that can 1v9 pretty much most situations. And he's really strong in the meta for a reason. He's just very good in combination with Lulu right now, but he's also incredibly good at just killing anybody that he likes when he gets into a fed situation. So this is the #1 Olaf player's build. It's super interesting. He rushes Righteous Glory. So he goes for Vamp Boots and rushes Righteous Glory, I guess to be able to just engage a fight and have the extra rundown potential on whoever he likes. He then goes into Triforce, Sterex Gauge, Guardian Angel, and then after that, Warmogs and Randuins. But Triforce, Sterex Gauge, Guardian Angel is like the 3 items that I consider core for Olaf. It's just interesting that this particular #1 Olaf player goes for Righteous Glory first. What I would say is if you're going to go for Righteous Glory first, you have to be damn sure that you're going to make use of it. The other really interesting rune is that he goes for Fleet Footwork in the jungle, which for me, I guess it's just because it gives you movement speed, right? So it gives you a little heal and movement speed, and I'm assuming it's because he wants the extra movement speed when getting into a fight to be able to, again, run down a particular champion. It just makes you a very speedy Olaf. I would say that the Fleet Footwork is good if you're confident in your ability to, you know, focus the right target, you're confident that you're fed enough to make use of it. Otherwise, I would always recommend that you go for Conqueror on Olaf. He goes for Triumph and Spirit Walker alongside Mastermind. Mastermind obviously being the key for any jungler that wants to focus down objectives. The Triumph one is interesting. I'm guessing it's because he has that execute potential with his true damage. So you deal a little bit more damage to enemies that are below 35% health. So, you know, you're going to have a lot of execute potential with that. And then also when you get when you get a kill or an assist, you're going to get that 10% missing health back, which is obviously great if you're looking to keep yourself alive in fights. Very interesting that this Olaf player does that. I'm going to show you the Baron lane Olaf player's build now, where he goes Triforce into Sterex Gauge, into Righteous Glory, again, something that we see a lot of Olaf players do. I would personally say that I would include a GA before I would Dead Man's Plate, but this is one of the best Baron lane Olaf players in the game right now. He goes Brutal, Hunter Titan, and also goes for Hunter Genius as well. So this is one of the top tier Olaf Baron lane players that is playing in the meta right now, and this is the build that he runs. But Olaf definitely has a lot of 1v9 potential. Okay, going to be looking at something a little different now. We're going to cover a couple of mages, or rather mid laners, I suppose, that I think have the 1v9 potential in this game. The first of which is Aurelion Sol. That might strike you as odd. Aurelion Sol's not really known for being able to do what he likes in team fights and just blow people up. However, Aurelion Sol has some of the strongest roaming potential in the game. If you're looking for a champion that can impact any lane, as well as have huge impact in team fights, Aurelion Sol is absolutely the champion that can do that. I believe he's one of the strongest mid laners for, in a solo queue situation, influencing the game as much as possible. And I think just because of that roam potential, because he's able to create massive stuns, because his teamfight presence is absolutely unparalleled, I do genuinely believe he is one of the best champions in the game. If you're in a solo queue scenario and you're looking to play mid lane more often than not, Aurelion Sol should be the champion that you are looking to pick up and use as much as possible. So I genuinely believe for that reason. Again, roam potential, teamfight presence, damage output, and scaling as well. He has some of the best damage scaling in the game. Aurelion Sol is good for that reason. Items, this is the standard Aurelion Sol build that I've seen the top 1 player use. There is some variation to this, but this is basically the go-to from what I've seen. Liandry's into Rhyalize gives you the Rhyalize Liandry's item combo, which is obviously very strong and gives you great teamfight presence and control. Infinity Orb for extra damage when they're below 35% HP, I think it is. And then Rabadons and Void Staff. Obviously, you go for the stasis upgrade as well. Stasis means that if you stasis and you're using your stars, they will continue to circle around you, so you can still remain safe and deal damage whilst in stasis. Conqueror, really the best rune, I'd say, for Aurelion Sol, because he is all about sustained damage. Brutal, just to give you extra early lane clear. Hunter Titan, and also the Honey Sweet Tooth, the Sweet Tooth rune, because that's good for sustain and giving you a little bit of extra gold. So I believe Aurelion Sol to be a super strong mid lane mage who can influence the game pretty much by himself with his incredible roaming potential. You do just have to be aware that to really make use of Aurelion Sol, you should be looking for opportunities to roam into side lanes as much as possible. Okay, now we're going to have a look at Fizz. And Fizz is a champion that is not particularly popular in the meta. He's a little bit off meta in terms of seeing play. If you look at the champion score for Fizz on the server, the champion score is much lower than the majority of the popular high elo 1v9 type carry picks. And that is because Fizz isn't quite as good in the meta right now, but especially in low elo, if you're looking for a champion that doesn't require as many mechanics as Akali or Yasuo, but still has the same ability to search for solo kills and has a lot of gank and roam potential. Wow, my tongue just died. Fizz is definitely the champion for you. As I said, any champion that in the laning phase has the ability to just force a 1v1 and look for a kill, has the ability to snowball and take over the game, and Fizz is one of those champions. Fizz also has very strong roam potential, so especially post 5 when you have your ultimate, you are a champion that is very good at just running down the river, searching for kills in the side lanes and snowballing that way as well. So Fizz is very good in that respect. Again, I don't think he's as strong as Akali or Yasuo. If he was, you would see him played much more frequently at high elo, but the champion scores tell us that he is not played as frequently at high elo, and as such the builds have been a little bit wonky. So I have combined some of the better looking builds with some of the better looking rune paths, and I've come up with this build, which I think is a very standard build for Fizz. Lichbane into Rabadons into Infinity Orb, and then beyond that it really depends what you need. You could have Guardian Angel, you could go straight to Void Staff, you could go Liandry's, or you could, as this guide suggests, you can go Morellonomicon as well. Lots of options, but the core 3 items are Lichbane, Rabadons, and Infinity Orb. In terms of runes, you have Electrocute, which I think is best because you're looking for 1v1 pressure. You have Brutal, Regeneration, and you also have your Honey Fruit. And I'm assuming Regeneration is picked up by the top players because Fizz's early laning phase is really awful, and you take a lot of damage. So I assume that's why they've picked it up. But again, Fizz is a champion that if you get rolling, and I think especially in low elos, you can take over games absolutely by yourself and carry them almost single-handedly. Okay. There is a reason there aren't many AD carries or marksmen in this list, and that is for the most part, even things like Jinx, which is obviously a very strong pick right now, and Misfortune, which is a very strong pick right now, they rely quite heavily on their team. And that is why AD carries are very rarely often looked at as people that can solo carry games. If you have a bad team and you're an AD carry main, you're going to have a bad time. It's very difficult, especially when you've got fed Yasuo, Akali, Zeds, and they're just killing you in the backline. It doesn't matter if you're 10-1, sometimes it's just nothing that you can do as an AD carry main. However, there is one AD carry that has the true 1v9 potential, and that is just because of how dominant in the laning phase that he can be. And that is Draven. Draven is high risk, high reward. If you absolutely snowball the game with Draven, you can easily take over, and especially because of the build paths that a lot of the top players go for, he is incredibly good at dealing with assassins or dealing with threats in team fights as well. Draven just is absolutely monstrous, but again, as I said, high risk, high reward. There are very few AD carries that can have the carry potential as a solo carry that Draven can. Yes, obviously if a Jinx gets fed, she can take over a game by herself, but she often requires a Lulu. She requires a good frontline. Your rest of your team has to not int for that to be the case a lot of the time. But Draven, he can beat fed carries because of the way that he works. So this is the build that the #1 Draven player plays, and look at how much lifesteal he puts in his kit. Bloodthirster first, into Blade of the Ruin King, into lifesteal boots, into Death's Dance. No critical strike here, pure lifesteal, pure damage. He goes for Conqueror with the Champion rune for 10% damage, which obviously is great in the early laning phase. And he goes for Loyalty and Pack Hunter, obviously trying to be in sync with his support as physically possible. So this is the #1 Draven players build. I've never tried it. I'm just putting it out there because it's the #1 Draven players build. This is the #2 Draven players build, a little bit more balanced in terms of damage output and with critical strike. Bloodthirster into Infinity Edge, into Phantom Dancer, into Death Stance. Still a lot of lifesteal in the build. Remember, Draven kind of thrives off very high attack damage, and that's why if you give him lots of lifesteal, even if he's taking damage, he can often out-sustain it. So that's one of the things that makes Draven very, very good at you know, carrying games, is the pure sustain that he gets from hitting people really hard with his axes. And if you can snowball on Draven, you can pretty much take over games. He's one of the few AD carries that I truly believe has 1v9 potential in the current game state. Okay, and I believe there is one more champion on the list that I do genuinely believe has 1v9 potential, and that is Camille. Camille is a little different in the sense that she has lots of different win conditions that she can activate. She can split push effectively, which is why I think the Mastermind rune is pretty good on her, because she deals extra damage to turrets, which is great, because again, if you can take turrets, you get the extra gold. She has the potential to join team fights. You know, unlike Fiora, who I think is much better at just pure split pushing, Camille has the ability to do both. So Camille can both join team fights and be effective in those, but also have the ability to split push effectively as well. There were some absolutely wild builds for Camille on the top leaderboards. Some of them look very specific to the player, so I'm not going to recommend them. But like the #1 Camille player, a guy called Mozilla, uses Aftershock, which I think Aftershock actually is pretty legit on Camille. Like, you use your hook shot, you land it, you get a big burst of magic resist. It means it's very difficult to out-trade you. But also it's like really specific to that player. He knows his limits on Camille, and I wouldn't recommend it for every Camille player. He also runs Exhaust Heal, which I'm not sure if he's trolling to make sure people don't copy his build, but, you know, it is what it is. But I think Conqueror, Brutal, Hunter Titan, and Mastermind is like a good build setup for Camille in the side lane, in the Baron lane. Triforce into Sterax, into Death Dance or GA, that's a very standard item combination for Camille. Boot upgrades, you may want to use that to be flexible. So, like, you might go Ninja Tabai versus lots of AD, you might go Mercury Treads versus lots of mages and lots of crowd control. This one has got Vampirism boots in, which I don't think is bad at all, but again, it's very specific for the situation, and uses Teleport too, because the Teleport, you know, allows you to join team fights across the map, which is nice. But I do believe Camille has the ability to activate different win conditions. Split pushing, we don't have many split push champions in this list because it's quite a difficult, I think it's quite a difficult win condition to use effectively in solo queue. But she has lots of 1v1 potential. You know, the one thing that I keep reiterating throughout this video is that champions that can essentially force fights, especially in 1v1 scenarios, and you know, especially if you know that you can beat the enemy champion, can often take over games with ease. And Camille is one of those. You hook shot onto the enemy, you have Hextech Ultimatum to lock them in, you can very easily find solo kills over and over again. So I do genuinely believe Camille is one of the strongest champions in the game for that reason. And I think she's got lots and lots of solo carry potential because of that. And that brings us to the end of my 1v9 champion list. Those are 10 champions, and I think they are the 10 best champions that can take over games by themselves. Either through roaming or jungle presence, objective control, forcing 1v1 fights and getting fed off kills. I believe these are the 10 best champions that can help you in solo queue, and these are the best champions with the build setups from the #1 players on the server. So hopefully this helps you get to grips and start winning some more games in solo queue, or also focus your champion pool. If you like the content, feel free to drop me a like and a sub. It would really mean a lot. And I'm going to rip this off from Pro Guides. If you get this far in the video, my question of the day is, who is your go-to 1v9 champion in ranked? Is it on this list, or is it something that I've missed? I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'll see you soon.